you guys a closing summary on what those hiring results look like in totality. And as I mentioned, slightly touch base on this retirement projection. As you see, 2015 in this point data, or in September, we had 47 people who are eligible to retire. They're not required to retire right now, so they could retire next year in 2016, where we have 12 people who are eligible to retire. If all 47 and 12 people decide to retire at the same time tomorrow, we're going to be in the same situation that we were earlier this year, where we don't have enough police officers out on the street. So the reason why I bring this up is to emphasize that recruiting efforts is essential in supporting Dave Burbank and his team out in the community, and getting the word of our career opportunities is necessary and critical to the future of the police department. That does conclude my presentation. I am available for any questions.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Palmisano.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the diligent, specific data points here. And I'm curious from your perspective, and I know that our work with the Office of Justice Programs is not complete. I sit on a subcommittee that's really more about the police conduct oversight work, but what kinds of recommendations come forward to us from OJP in this? Is the diversification of our force a big recommendation that they gave to us, and what thoughts do they bring to the table on how to do that? I think this is a question for,
Yes, Chair Yang, Councilmember Palmisano. So just want to get clarification. So specifically, are you asking, have any of the OJP subcommittees moved forward recommendations regarding our diversity efforts?
Yes.
Yes, they have. And not only just with OJP, but certainly even our Police Conduct Oversight Commission has also talked about the importance of making sure that we have a robust and reflective, diverse police department. It ties into so many of the things we do. Chief Harteau certainly wants to move us in the direction of building a department that is viewed by our community as being both legitimate and trustworthy, and certainly having a diverse police department which is reflective of its community certainly helps and contributes in that area. So yes, we want to continue to work on that. We believe there's, even amidst a lot of the talk and discussions that's been going on in policing nationally, we believe that's an opportunity for us to get more engaged with our communities, have some shared dialogue, and really seek their input too, and what we may be doing well, but where we may also be missing some gaps in terms of reaching out and really getting our young people, young men and women, to look at the Minneapolis Police Department as a place they want to have a professional career.
In the original recommendations that were set forward by OJP, I believe that the ones that Chief Harteau accepted all of the recommendations and kind of an unprecedented take on this kind of an interaction. Was this one of those specific recommendations, or has it just been coming forward from these subcommittees?
Through Chair Yang, Councilmember Palmisano, yes, this is part of that is looking at our hiring, recruitment, and retention process, and so yeah, this is all part of making sure that we continue to do that.
Thank you.
Councilmember Gordon.
Thank you. I really appreciate the report and the information, and I think there's some hopeful information that's coming through here. Maybe this will be a regular thing. I did have one question, and I know you probably won't have the answer, but something I'm also curious about is the residents, where our police officers live, and even within the city, what part of the city do they live in? A lot of times I have constituents who think it's helpful to have police officers coming from the city and understanding Minneapolis and what it's like. And there's a notion out there that a lot of our police officers live way out in the suburbs and don't know anything about the city. And I don't think that's necessarily true. There's also a history in this where in the 80s, the city attempted to put a residency requirement on police officers, requiring them to live in the city. And then one of the state legislators over there at the time preempted all that and said, so state law says we can't require that now. I've also been very interested in coming up with some kind of incentive, maybe for all city employees, but particularly police officers. Could we offer some kind of incentive for people, home buyer assistance? I'm not sure what, It's just an employee benefit for those of us who live in the city. So that's a speech. But the little part of the question is, do we track how many officers live in the city, and do you happen to know?
Councilmember Yang, Councilmember Gordon, that's a great question. I don't have that data available to me right in front of me, but I will be able to provide you with that information as far as what is our applicant pool, which cities they're coming from, and then also I will be able to provide you where our current residents of our current officers. So we'll be able to provide that to you. But also to add, in that subject matter expert review, we also do take into consideration Minneapolis residency. That is a question that we do ask. While it is not a requirement by the state, we do find that is a very valuable perspective in how our officers operate. And so we do take a look at that in the consideration of subject matter expert review.
Well, excellent, thank you. And do you know of any other cities that might offer some kind of a benefit to their employees if they live closer to where they work, or a residency requirement? Is that something that's done elsewhere? I know that we've promoted it in parts of my ward where we just want the University of Minnesota to hire more people who live near their work. So live near your work is kind of a trendy topic and an issue now. And I'm wondering if you're aware of other efforts in the country.
Yeah. Councilmember Yang and Councilmember Gordon, I am not aware of any best practice that is happening right now in other cities or government agencies. I'd be more than happy to look into it and see what I can bring back to you for you.
Thanks. And I noticed with a lot of our recruiting efforts, clearly we're recruiting from Minneapolis, in Minneapolis, going to our schools. And I suspect that our CSOs, a lot of CSOs come from our local people who are interested and get involved. So I appreciate that, and appreciate the report and the direction we're going, especially next year, which is pretty amazing.
Thank you.
So, Councilmember Gordon, I just want to mention to you that last year, I think NPR or maybe the Strip did a story about officer residency in the city of Minneapolis, and the number was pretty paltry. It was 6% of the police force actually live here in the city of Minneapolis, 94% live outside, and you know, I hear you. I mean, maybe we can try to incentivize folks to change that, but I mean, this is kind of where we are. And you know, I imagine, I mean, you know, if you do it now, I think our numbers don't change all that much. But, you know, I for myself, I look at the CSO hiring, and it gives me hope. It gives me hope that we can change things, we can do things differently, and you know, get a different result. I think in a lot of ways, you know, we talk about how we want to diversify the police force, and you know, it will get diversified, let's say in the next 10, 20 years, and then 10, 20 years comes along and we're at the same place that we were before, and so we got to do things pretty differently. And you know, the CSO class of 2016, I mean, you know, it matches the rhetoric that a lot of us on this side talk about, and I think that, you know, if we can get to, you know, doing that with recruits and cadets, I mean, that's going to be fantastic for us. And so, you know, I'm hopeful about that. And, you know, I'm going to save the last word for DC Arredondo. And, you know, I just want to tell the public that you're the chief today, and you're the chief for this whole week, I think, right?
Chair Yang, you missed it by about 24 hours. So Chief Arto is back.
She's back. Good. Okay.
So you can't pick on me right now. Then,
Okay.
so.
Okay.
But Chair Yang, if I could just
Closing comments, please.
If I could just thank you, Chair Yang. So while these are great mechanisms that we have to use to move forward in terms of our recruitment, I don't want to underscore, though, the importance of the first opportunity to really recruit our men and women out there, building relationships with our young people at a very early young age, long before the CSO application process. So from a cultural standpoint within the MPD, we have to realize that every single MPD officer that wears this badge, regardless of what capacity they're serving in, they are ambassadors. They have a critical opportunity to touch positively the lives of our young people out there in the community. And so by the time they get to the age of being eligible to apply as a CSO, they have that connection already. So we need to focus on it in two areas: our day-to-day activities and our outreach to our communities and our young people, but certainly making sure that we continue to capitalize on our CSO cadet and recruitment. So.
Okay. Well, thank you to the both of you. And our next presentation is with regards to Police Department misdemeanor data report, and this is the report being given by Mary Ellen Hang from the City Attorney's Office. And this is a situation in which the City Attorney's Office and Police Department are reporting back to us to provide data on misdemeanor arrests, charging, prosecution, and diversion by race, gender, age, geography, and offense for the years 2010 to 2014. And this was a staff direction that was at the urging of Councilmember Gordon and myself roughly about a year ago. So please go ahead.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair, council members. I'm Mary Ellen Hang. I'm the criminal deputy for the City Attorney's Office. Susan Siegel apologizes. She is out dealing with a personal matter today, so she was unable to be here. And just as a little background, this data was quite challenging for our office to compile as we really started digging into it. There's obviously quite a lot of data. We have a fairly substantial caseload. We pulled this data out of our case management system, Practice Manager. And just as we go through the slides to give you a little background, we built Practice Manager back in 2006. And over the last several years, we have been improving it with the help of the city IT department and through lots of integrations with the court system and the police department, their capper system and that. And so and those integrations really didn't start to really solidify until around 2012, 2013. So some of this earlier data, there's missing data because we didn't have those integrations in place, and we did our best to try to fill in the blanks as best we could. So our data moving forward and from 2013, 2014 is a lot more solid, but we've done the best we can to kind of piece it together to give I think a pretty good overview of what we're looking like. Basically, between 2010 and 2014, our office in general terms has reviewed about 96,000 cases. As you can see, the caseloads have gone down over the past several years. And of those 96,000 cases, approximately 81% of those cases are charged by law enforcement officers, not just MPD, but State Patrol, Park Police, U of M. They do this charging through issuing citations and through charging individuals, booking them in the jail. The rest of the charging is done by our office as we file complaints, and those would be all our gross misdemeanors and a select number of misdemeanor offenses. As I said, you can see from 2010 down to 2014, our overall caseload has diminished quite a bit. And even years prior to this, I can remember when I first started back in 1997, we were looking at 40,000 cases. We were very busy, and that's slowly gone down over the years. The way we broke this data up is we analyzed it just by charge level, severity level. Between our gross misdemeanor offenses, our most serious, the ones punishable by up to a year in jail, and our misdemeanor offenses, both city ordinances and state statutes, punishable by up to 90 days in jail. We analyzed that by race and gender and age. We looked at offense type, and then we looked at the dispositions that the prosecutors in our office were able to achieve on those cases. For our severity level, as you can see, the bulk of our caseload come from misdemeanor offenses. 89% of the cases that we prosecute are misdemeanors as opposed to gross misdemeanors. Again, not a big surprise. Gender-wise, the majority of our defendants in court are male, 65% as opposed to female. And age, a little over half are 35 years or younger. And then, and I don't think that that's a big surprise either, that that's what the data showed. In a general breakdown of our race, 40% of the defendants that we prosecuted are Black or African American. And this chart gives you a better breakdown over the years of the various breakdowns. And I think you can see that the numbers, while they have gone down, which is indicative of the declining caseload, we don't see too many very large spikes or declines. I think it's stayed fairly consistent over the years. As far as type of offenses, and this is where I think DC Arredondo's and our data differs a little bit in that for our office, we spend about half our time prosecuting what we categorized as property, livability, or justice crimes. And what that entails would be everything from what you'd expect: damage to property, theft, we consider property crimes; livability are public urinations, possession of drug paraphernalia, loiter with intent, those nuisance crimes that occur in the communities; and our justice crimes, primarily false information to police, obstruction of legal process.
And if I could, Chair Yang, council members, Mary Ellen is just absolutely right. So our side of it, in terms of our arrests, the majority that we see in terms of misdemeanor arrests are actually traffic-related offenses. So we see when we look at both the city attorney's office for their misdemeanor, significant majority, MPD arrests, these are not serious felony-type crimes, either livability or traffic-related. The concern, I think, for both our offices is that, if this becomes the gateway for most individuals into the criminal justice system, we need to re-examine then our practices.
As far as our dispositions, we achieve some sort of guilty plea, some sort of conviction on a little over half of our cases. And I think that's a fairly consistent conviction rate. Our conviction rate has gone up over the years, primarily due to better preparation in our office, where we've added a lot more staff. We've created some new positions like our victim witness assistants, which have helped us be more efficient in our prosecution, get better contact with our victims and our witnesses to ensure that they will come and help us at trial. And so we've been able to be a lot more successful in resolving cases, both not only at trial, but at earlier stages of the process as well. And this slide talks about our dismissal. Of all the cases that we dismiss, about half are dismissed because the defendants have multiple cases. And that is not something that's unusual for us to see at this level. Frequently, we will see offenders come in with 2, 3, 4 cases. And we do negotiations in our office, and we dismiss a fair number of cases in return for a guilty plea and a sentence on another case. But I think that's what makes the system work and makes us the most efficient. And this is a racial breakdown of our defendants for the types of cases. And what we did is we obviously prosecute many, many different types of cases. For this presentation, we picked out what we thought were the categories you would be most interested in, our DWIs. And that is the one category where our defendants are majority of those defendants are white as opposed to the other categories. Non-DWI category is the driver's license, the insurance violations that DC Arredondo was talking about, and that's about 23% of our caseload. Assaults include both domestic and the non-domestics. We see a lot of, stranger assaults out of the bars at night, things like that. Property and livability, I explained what those categories entail.
Ms. Hang, why is the known number so high?
I think it's due primarily to some of the older cases. A lot of this data, especially when it comes to race, right now we're able to get that data through our integrations, especially with the MPD capper system. So if the officer is able to record that data, it will come into our system. We do not have those integrations with State Patrol or Metro Transit. So while we put those police reports into our case management system, it's a manual scanning process. And so when we run the query in our system, it's blank, and we would have to look them up individually. And there were, as you can see, 9,000 cases. We simply just didn't have the resources to do that. But it's an integration issue.
Councilmember Gordon?
So, thank you. So are all of these misdemeanor offenses?
This would be both gross misdemeanor and misdemeanor, I believe.
Okay. And I think I'm a little confused because I've got a couple PowerPoint slides and there might be you might have tweaked it since the first one got sent to us, so I'm not sure. But I think there was a slide where it was sort of gross misdemeanor and misdemeanor.
Yes, and I don't know if I think for this presentation we combined them, but in the handout that you have, we have a lot more detail, and we did break them down,
Okay.
all these offenses by gross misdemeanor and misdemeanor.
Okay, thank you.
And again, as you can see, when we're talking about offense types by gender, the majority of our defendants in all categories are male as opposed to female. And then age, again, the majority of our offenders are in that. We had 16, even though we don't do juveniles, we have some authority to prosecute 16-year-olds for certain traffic offenses like DWI, so we do get some of those defendants, but the majority of our defendants are at least 18 years of age. And this slide is just a general overview of our case disposition by the race of the defendants. And again, by gender and by age. The next few slides talk about our diversion programs, and this is an area that we are continuing to expand. On Tuesday, we have a new employee starting, and she is going to be our diversion coordinator, and this is a new position that we created. Our hope is when she gets acclimated to the job is that she will be able to be proactive in identifying cases and defendants that meet our eligibility criteria for diversion, and proactively reach out to them and offer them the option to do our diversion programs in the hopes of keeping them out of the court system, keeping these offenses off of their record, and hopefully having a positive impact on their lives by completing the program. These are the types of offenses that we offer diversion on. A lot of them are low-level livability offenses and our theft offenses. The types of diversion programs that we have are our restorative justice program, and that is where we send our livability offenses, our public urinations, our possessing drug paraphernalia, open bottles, consumings. We have a theft diversion program, which we focus on shoplifting offenses, failing to pay cab fare, dine and dash offenses. We have the driver diversion program for people who are suspended and revoked due to unpaid fines and fees to help them. And then starting at the first of the year, we're rolling out a new pilot diversion program with the help of RJCA for low-level misdemeanor obstruct cases. So these would be non-force cases where someone interferes with the police officers trying to perform their duties. They get charged with misdemeanor obstruct. They'll have a chance to come, and at the beginning it will be DC Arredondo. He will sit down and meet with the defendant and have a facilitated discussion with an RJCA member in the hopes of both sides gaining a better understanding of why everyone reacted the way they did, kind of build some relationships, and hopefully prevent some of these arrests in the future from both angles, with just trying to open up that dialogue. And so we're going to start that at the beginning of the year, and we're pretty hopeful that that will be a success. So for our driver diversion program, this right now is a pilot program. It was started in 2008. We joined in 2010. So we've been participating for about 5 years. We have approximately 2,800 Minneapolis people with a Minneapolis open DAR or DAS, driving after revocation or suspension. 75% of those participants from Minneapolis are African American or Black, and 66% are male. For restorative justice, we have had approximately 1,600 participants go through that program. Approximately 78% of those were male. And then you can see the racial breakdown. About 57% of the defendants who go through restorative justice are white, and 48 are, again, that young age range between 18 and 21. And then this is our new program. We started this in the beginning of 2015. So we've got about 9-10 months worth. We've sent about 140 defendants through that. I thought this was kind of interesting when we put the data here that 52%, so about half, are male or female. And these are shoplifting cases, primarily is what they are. And the racial breakdown of those participants, about 47% are Black or African American, and again, that young age group, almost half are in that 16 to 25 range. And for these diversion programs, if we can, we try to divert them pre-court and dismiss a citation if it was issued, so they don't have a court record. Some do come through the court, but they get a continuance for dismissal. So if they're successful in the program, the case is dismissed, and then they could potentially move for an expungement so that they would end up with a clean record if they successfully complete all these programs. So that's kind of just a general overview of the data from our office. The handout I gave you has a lot more detail. We just felt, we could have had a 100 slide PowerPoint, and we didn't want to do that, but we tried to break it down and do some comparisons on the misdemeanor, gross misdemeanor level for you. And so when you've had a chance to digest that, we can certainly answer any questions. I know we got this to you late, but it really, Michelle Jacobson in my office spent a lot of time helping me put this together, and it was a large task, and I think a good learning process. It was interesting to see the results, but it was, when we really started to dig in, it was a very overwhelming task to try to get that data as accurate as we could.
Well, I have to tell you, I appreciate the efficiency in the presentation, and I appreciate responding to us on that. And I will try to minimize the number of staff directions from Councilmember Gordon myself about that. But Councilmember Gordon, good questions.
I do, and I don't know that I have any staff directions yet, partly because there's so much data and information here, I barely had time to scratch the surface and get into it at all. I guess I want to ask if you've been able to draw any conclusions about our greatest fears. So our greatest fears, I think, are that there's a bias that interacts with the stop originally, whether it's where it might not be biased, but some kind of a judgment that's made. It might be a hot spot or something, but it also might be some implicit bias based on race or age or gender about the stop. And then the concern is when then the charging, and I don't think we have the connection yet in this information about the stop and who's getting charged, because we haven't connected this to the stop, right? So from here, at least we can see who's got a charge. And then, are you more or less likely to have your charge dismissed or disposed of efficiently and effectively if you're a white male or not, for example, or whatever? And then, are you more or less likely to get offered into a diversion program if you're white, or if you have some kind of privilege in that way? So that's kind of the stuff I'm looking for and trying to figure out if we can say that or not, and if then we can somehow help over the course of time influence how that's going. And do you think it looks like there's any kind of a bias or propensity or any kind of breaks that are given based on any kind of demographics? Does that make sense?
Yeah, Chair Yang, Councilmember Gordon. And I'll let City Attorney Hang touch on some of the charging aspects. Clearly, our men and women are out there. We want to continue to make sure that we are viewed as being legitimate, and that folks have a trust in us so that they're not even questioning whether it's a biased stop. However, we clearly, there are disparities. And I think that both the information that the city attorney has provided, certainly the information that you have there are disparities that as a result of traffic stops, whether it's in a certain area that's predominantly African American, these disparities exist. So one of the things moving forward, and I think you brought up a good question, Councilmember Gordon, regarding diversion. One of the things I think that we have seen, at least from the 30,000-foot view, are that certain communities are impacted differently by diversion. So if, for instance, if I was trying to attempt to get to work every day, my license was suspended, but I still needed to get to work to take care of my children, my family, my rent, I take that risk. But then now, I live in South Minneapolis, but now once my vehicle has been towed, I don't have the fees to take care of that out of the impound lot, but the diversion process is set up somewhere across town. Now that makes it even more difficult for me to attend that diversion and be away from work. And these are all things that I think that the city attorney's office and the MPD that we're really trying to look at. And why are there differences in terms of who participates in the diversion programs? Are they reflective and at least tend to the needs of the community that's more impacted by that? So these are things that I think for the first time in a long time, the MPD and the city attorney's office are looking at are there unintended consequences to the enforcement, and how does diversion play into that? But I think we're on a good path. And as far as the charging, who gets charged less or more,
So are you, just to clarify, are you saying you've noticed a trend in diversion, that it looks as if, based on where you live, you're more likely to participate in a diversion program?
Chair Yang, Councilmember Gordon, one thing that I have heard, and I've been in meetings with community members about this specific idea of diversion, is one of the things that they have recommended is that as opposed to city governments setting the criteria for what diversion looks like, perhaps we should listen from community members to see how that would better impact them, how we would get more participation, what are some barriers that we frankly just don't see. So, we have what diversion criteria and what that setup should be in our mind, but if it's a population that we're really trying to impact positively to offer this, we may need to listen more to their ideas and input.
But that didn't necessarily come from the numbers we saw today. That's from a lot of conversations that you've had.
Yes.
Okay.
And Chair Yang and Councilmember Gordon, we had our annual audit with Restorative Justice a few weeks ago, and in just our discussions with them, they were anecdotally just mentioning that, right now, and you could see from the stats, the majority of their participants are coming out of the U of M. We do a lot of diversion programs for young people over minor consuming, the house parties and things like that. And they said they're not seeing as many cases out of the 4th Precinct, North Minneapolis, as they would like. And if you look at the offenses that are eligible, we just know from our own stats that there are a lot of people in those areas that are being cited for those type of offenses. And I think that's one of the things that we hope to do with our new diversion coordinator is first be able to start keeping some more reliable statistics so we can see if there are any trends. And I think, as you can see, our attorneys, we have really 10